You're listening to The Practicing Law Librarian. This limited series is part of PLI's Ever Current podcast, where we bring you insights and updates from legal thought leaders. Find additional episodes at pli.edu or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Karen Osterly. Welcome to the Practicing Law Librarian podcast, presented by PLI's Legal Information Services Group. This podcast brings you conversations with and for the law librarian community. As a practicing law librarian myself, I've been working in legal information services for 34 years, currently with PLI's Library Relations Group. And today I have with me Elaine Knecht. Elaine has been the Director of Information Services, aka the librarian, at Barclay Damon LLP since 2006. Prior to her work as a librarian, Elaine's first career was as a program host on a public radio station playing classical music. With earlier degrees in music performance, she also spent time as a music teacher and opera singer. Enjoy exploring the connections between music, mathematics, logic, and legal research with us. Elaine's Summer Associate Research Academy and her growing library of 5-minute training videos on all matters library-related are brilliant ideas she is happy to share with us. To read her full biography, please see our podcast page. Welcome, Elaine.
Thank you very much.
We've known each other a couple of years. We met through PLLIP, part of AALL.
Right. Yes, that's right.
Can you talk to me about your work as a law librarian, what you might like to share?
My interest in law librarianship came because while I was at library school, I was required to do some community service that was library related. So what I did was I volunteered to hand out flyers at the New York Library Association annual meeting that was taking place in Buffalo. So I talked to every single New York librarian who came by, and one of them said, "And what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm in school and I work part-time now for a law firm." And she said, "Definitely stay there, do that. That's where the money is." So I had already begun to enjoy my work it was at that time Hiscock and Barclay. And I was just working part-time. The director of the library was in another city. The library partner was in Buffalo with me, so I had the opportunity to ask questions because I had no legal background at all. As you saw from my resume, my background is in music. But I enjoyed the research portion of library school, and then adding to that on the layer of legal resources. That's what made me continue my interest. And I took legal resource courses in the library school, not part of the JD program, part of the library program, and stayed with Hiscock and Barclay until it became Barclay Damon. And by that time, I was already director of the library. So, you get to a point where you're there so long, you might as well stay. So that's how I got started in the library. The other interesting thing about it is that I found out about the job through the graduate student listserv that was available from the university. And it said, part-time, Hiscock and Barclay, research, administrative stuff, education, trending toward the MLS. They weren't looking for somebody who'd already graduated. They were looking for somebody who was in the midst. And I said, well, sure, my education is trending toward the MLS. I had been in library school for 5 weeks. I had just started library school. So I was telling the truth, and here I am. I've just passed my 20th anniversary with the firm that's now Barclay Damon. So we've been good to each other. It's been fun. I've enjoyed it.
That's wonderful. I knew it as Hiscock Barclay when I used to manage that area. I was a sales manager for Matthew Bender for 3 years, and we covered upstate New York and came to Buffalo. And so I had my experiences trying to get home when the lake effect was going on. So that was interesting. My undergrad is in philosophy, and I took a class based on a book called Gödel, Escher, and Bach, and it was taught by a very unusual, wonderful professor. But it's about how mathematics and music connect, and to me, libraries do too, because of the ordering and the indexing and the way that we categorize things.
That's true.
And so I was fascinated when I saw your music background. Can you talk about that some? I mean, what do you do to get ready to be in charge of a national public radio program?
I started with the radio station. It's WNED-FM. It's owned by the Western New York Public Broadcasting System. And I started with them before the radio station was on air. They had purchased what they call a stick license, and they were just literally just running beautiful music tapes, but they wanted to turn it into a classical music station. So they hired a program director from Cleveland, and then he started interviewing local people. And I was working in a music store at the time, and the advertising director of the music store heard about this because it was going to be a non-commercial station, so they were going to lose their revenue from the beautiful music that was playing. She told me about that. I went and interviewed, and I started the day the radio station came on the air. I was the nighttime announcer for Saturday and Sunday nights. I did that for a very long time, and then I moved to daytime, and then I started to pick up. We have a wonderful producer. He's actually still with the station. And we did a number of national programs, including music from Chautauqua. You're probably familiar with the Chautauqua Institute, a little bit south of here. And the station would record the concerts from the symphony. They would record some of the chamber music concerts. And then I was the host that did all the voiceovers. The way you hear like Alec Baldwin now doing the New York Symphony, you hear that at night. Well, I was doing that for the Chautauqua Symphony. That went so well. And I'm a big opera buff, so we started a program called Top 10 Opera. And one season we did exactly that, Top 10 Opera. Then another season we did Top 10 American Opera. And these programs got picked up by Minnesota Public Radio, the American Public Radio System. And so they did get distributed literally across the country. And I wound up hearing from a high school friend who'd moved to Hawaii and heard one of our programs and said, "Is that really you?"
Wow.
So it was wonderful to be part of some very exciting programming. And the station still exists, and I still listen. And I had a couple of things happen in between being on the radio and where I am now. But so that's how I got started, just because, and I may not have a background in music, obviously that helps. There was a form that you had to read as part of the, as part of the interview. You had to read what was in effect a pre-concert announcement, and it included all of the unusual names you could imagine: Gennady Rojdensky, Eno Johanni Rautavaara, not just Bach and Sibelius, the normal guys, but all of these really unusual things, Dmitri Horsovsky,
Right.
So I made my way through all of those, and I got the job.
Excellent.
So sometimes I was on in the morning. I was for a very long time, actually, I was the morning announcer from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. And then I did the opera programs and weeknights, and it was all over the place, but it was a lot of fun.
Wow. And so you were still working at the music store at the time?
No, at that point, I finished at the music store and went to the radio station. And that was just before I got married. So then I did a few other things. Then I got married, and then I was at the radio station for on and off for 29 years. And then because it was part-time mostly, I also picked up teaching. That's when I started. I taught music for a year at a private school, K through 12. That was actually pre-K through 12. That was pretty stressful. But I had the opportunity to write a little opera for the young students. So that was fun. And we had an award-winning high school chorus. So that was also fun. And I actually, maybe I shouldn't say this on a program that people might listen to all over the country, but I developed a program called Sounds Around, which was a 1-hour program that was weekly, and it was for youth musicians, children musicians. And we interviewed young children, and we talked about prodigies, Hilary Hahn, young people who were playing professionally. And I took that to a producers conference in Falls Church, Virginia, and I'm pretty sure it was stolen by another radio station who had a program that's still running. It's called something different now, but very successful. But I'm pretty sure they stole my idea. But there you go. It's great that people are listening to classical music. That's the main thing.
I'm kind of stunned by the way you throw in there, well, I also sang opera.
Actually, my favorite opera story, and I sang with all of the opera companies here in Western New York. I auditioned for the Toronto Opera. I auditioned for the Chicago Lyric Opera. Obviously, I didn't get the job, or I wouldn't be here today. But I had a lot of fun doing all of the local operas. And I sang in France for a while because I did study in south of France for a period of time. And in Paris with a very well-known vocal teacher who, I'm 69 years old. Everybody that I studied with has long since passed away. But this came out in one of my bios at a Barclay Damon firm event. And I was sitting at lunch with an attorney, a group of attorneys, and one said, "It says here you're an opera singer. That's ridiculous. You couldn't possibly be an opera singer." I said, "Well, yeah, I was. Just sing something." So I sang the letter aria from the Ballad of Baby Doe. It's in English, so it's easy to understand. It's based on a true story. It's very dramatic, high notes, low notes. Has a very quiet ending. There's this big, just before the end, there's this big part, very quiet ending. And we were outdoors, and you could have heard a pin drop. The attorney who asked me to sing, his jaw dropped, and he said, "Oh my gosh, you really are an opera singer." So that's my favorite firm and opera story. That works out very well. I was fortunate enough to create the role of the blind beggar's mother in an opera by Richard Prull called The Beggar's Christmas.
Oh.
Sang with Dave Brubeck one time. That was exciting. I sang with a group. We did the entire Mass by Leonard Bernstein with children's chorus and dancers, and it was just wonderful.
Well, I think that's wonderful. No, I know the Richard Prull name. I sing in a church choir, and we do a lot of his pieces. I want to ask you, teaching as you did from pre-K through 12, teaching music.
It was just like teaching attorneys.
Well, that's just exactly what I was going to say, because I used to sell children's books. That was my first life, selling educational books and to families. And then I went to selling law books to attorneys and law firms. And so people would say, "Oh boy, that's really different." I would say, "No, not at all."
No, not
Not
really.
at all. So here's my question. You're in charge of training attorneys as they join the firm and certainly as they go on through their careers. And you did this teaching for pre-K through 12. Can you talk about the similarities?
Yes, a lot of repetition. And on the radio, I did a lot of fundraising. You've heard public radio fundraising, public television fundraising. And the rule is people have to hear something 7 times before they get it.
Right.
That's the case with kindergartners, and it's the case with new attorneys as well. So to my way of thinking, the trick, the most important thing is to present those 7 things or that one thing in 7 little bit different ways so that it's not boring. You remember when we did this? Well, now we're going to do the same thing, but this way, or in this iteration, or on this website. So repetition is, in all of teaching, repetition is important, but you have to do it in a way that gets your attention. So I would say whether it's pre-K attorneys or high school students, it's repeating is the most important thing.
Excellent. And do you use any of the sort of adult learner tenets about some people being visual learners, some people being tactile learners?
You know what? I probably shouldn't say this, but get over it. If you have to learn this stuff. If you want to write it down and read it again, fine, do it. I've got it up here on the board if you want to take a picture of it. If you want to record me while I'm saying it, it's up to you to figure it out. Because maybe you couldn't tell from my bio, but we have nearly 300 attorneys, and we have 1 librarian.
Yep.
1, that's me. So as much as I would like to say, yes, it's important to work with individuals, I don't have time for that. Everybody's got to get on board as soon as possible. Although I don't poo-poo the different learning qualities. I have a grandson who is amazingly dyslexic, and he's a listening learner, and he's very good at it, and he learns everything he needs to as long as he can hear it in the headphones. So I understand that there are different ways that people best learn, but let's face it, when you're a grown-up, it's up to you to figure that out.
I like it. Well, I think this is a nice story. When I asked you a couple of months ago whether you would consider doing this podcast episode, you said, well, I'm not sure that I have anything to share. And what I had originally written down as a potential topic was doing it all, because I thought you were the only librarian there, because I don't know.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, with 300 attorneys, which is really, really, really unusual. I mean,
It is. It's very unusual. I was just sitting in on one of the consulting firms that works with legal groups, and it turns out that in firms of our size, the library to attorney ratio is 56, 1 to 56.
Right.
So I should have 4 colleagues.
Right.
But I don't think I need 4 colleagues. I think I could do it with 2 colleagues. But I think I do as much as I can. And the patrons that I serve, the attorneys and the staff, not just the attorneys, but the staff, the marketing department, the disbursements people, I do a little work for conflicts, that everybody's happy with the service that the library is providing. But there's so much more that could be done for attorneys and staff if there were more librarians. Even in terms of saving money, we subscribe to a service that costs $75,000, and we could hire a librarian who could do that for $60,000, as well as all of the other jobs that could be assigned to a librarian. So
Right.
it's that's me just saying what I think is possible.
It's okay.
I do as much as I can. I have been accused, and this is kind of patting myself on the back, of overserving our attorneys, because I do check my email at night. I do check my email on the weekend. And sometimes people, I'm not checking it constantly, but I will, morning, afternoon, and evening. And sometimes in the middle of a Saturday, somebody's working on a project and she really needs these documents from the Erie County Clerk's office. And darn, I'm going to stop and get them, because, that's the way that I can help her best serve our clients.
Right.
So sometimes it's a little crazy. When I go on vacation, the run up to vacation is, like every day for the 10 days before vacation, I'm sending an email saying, remember, I'm not going to be here for 10 days. I'm not going to be here for 10 days. I'm not going to be here for 10 days. And sometimes people remember, and sometimes, in the middle of vacation, I'll get an email saying, didn't you get my email? Aren't you going to help me do this?
Right.
Well, I'm in another time zone. As a matter of fact, I'm on another continent.
Right.
So, no, I'm not going to help you with this. It'll have to wait till I get back.
Right. Exactly. I gave you all a heads up. I know that we share your rep, Teresa Gann, who's a lovely, lovely young woman at PLI.
Indeed.
Can you talk about how you use our products in your training and service to attorneys?
Oh, one of the things that I do when attorneys join us is I have a template email so that when I meet them, and it's usually like this online, I say, put your pencil down. You don't have to write any of this down. I'm going to tell you all of these things. However, I've got a template email. It's all in there. And then you'll be able to save it, and you'll have your temporary passwords, your permanent passwords, all of that. And it includes the registration for PLI, because we promote PLI not only for continuing legal education credits, which here in New York, everybody needs a certain number of every other year.
Right.
And we have a firm-wide subscription to that, so attorneys don't have to pay individually or petition the firm for additional. But we also promote PLI as an educational tool, particularly for brand new librarians, first-year associates, and even the summer associates, the 1Ns and 1Ls and 2Ls, because there's so many not practice area specific, but practice useful tools. For example, I just had somebody sign up for time management for lawyers. Everybody should have. And when I talk to the summer associates, when they're coming in at the end of May, when I'll meet with them for the first time, live and in person, PLI will definitely be something that they see, because time management for attorneys is a great course to take. I know that PLI also has a series of great introductory classes that I recommend to summer associates all the time. And when I told the summer associate coordinator attorney about them, oh my gosh, so excited. Yes, we're going to put that on the list. You should do this. It doesn't cost you anything. And let's face it, everybody's busy. You can listen in the background if you're not going for credit. And when you hear something that catches your eye or your ear, you can make notes. You can go back, you rewind a little bit and hear it again. So having those on-demand programs that I can recommend to, as I say, especially to young people, that newer attorneys, I should say, that's been a big plus for us to have access to all of those. I'm sorry we don't have access to the rest of the material, but that's another story entirely.
Maybe down the road. Maybe soon. No, I fall into that trap too. I have to be careful to say newer attorneys,
Right.
less tenured attorneys.
Less tenured. Oh, I like that.
You like that? Are there other training tools that you maybe have had time to put together for your attorneys that save you time in the long run?
I am working on, and I'll tell you this just between you, me, and the lamppost, don't spread it around. I'm planning to retire at the end of next year, at the end of 2024. So one of the things I've been working on, the firm has a wonderful intranet that includes a training page that's put up by the folks at Information Technology. And they've got a ton of stuff on all of the different programs that we use. I manage screen, the whiteboard thing, I can't remember, Smart Sheets. We've got all those little videos about those. That's what I'm working on now. I want to determine 10 5-minute things, 10, here's how to do this one thing.
Right.
And here's a 5-minute video that you can watch. And I want to get those up and running so I can sort of test them this year and then make sure that they're all up to date next year before I go away, so that if somebody says, well, how do I pull a docket from X, or even something like, you'd be surprised how many people can't figure out how to reset their password in PLI. There it is right down there. Forgot your password? Even if I
just click on that button.
Oh my gosh. So video is going to be the next big thing for me. And we've had very good luck since the pandemic we started with Life Size, but then we moved to Zoom and Teams. And so I've had a lot of success working with Teams, and just for 5 minutes, showing hop onto Teams and I'll show you how to do this. And then they can see my screen, I can see them and see where it looks like, oh, that's not making sense. Okay, let's go back and try it again.
Right.
So video has been, especially since we're so geographically dispersed, I'm not going to our Boston office on any kind of a regular basis,
right,
or even our Albany office. I only go there 4 times a year. So having the video option has been a great help for me in getting the library services out to people that are remote.
Did you start that during COVID?
We did. We did start that during COVID because I'm sure it was the case for most people listening. There was many, many months where we weren't going into the office at all. So it was the only way to answer questions and make sure people had what they needed. And the upside of that is everybody remembers that we did that during COVID, and we can still do it. Even though we're back to some extent in the office, we can still take advantage of services like Life Size and Teams to communicate, to connect, so to speak.
Excellent. What is one piece of advice you'd give to somebody starting out in the library career?
Don't believe anybody. The very first week that I worked, the idea that you need to get over the idea that that's an attorney and he or she knows what they're talking about, because they don't always. The very first week I was there, guy comes charging into the library. I need that book on appellate practice. It's red. So you can't, this is not a video, but I pointed around the library. We had a big, big library at that point. And I said, would you look around? Fully 75% of the books in here are red. So please go back to your office and I'll find it and I'll get it to you.
Oh.
So that's, you can't, if an associate says to me, well, the attorney says I will find a case about this topic. Well, maybe not, so let's do the searching. Let's do all the due diligence we can. And we may find out that, no, this hasn't been addressed or it hasn't been decided in the way that your attorney wants. So don't assume that you're getting good advice just because it's coming from a more senior attorney. Start with your own research. You obviously have got to have a baseline of something. I'm looking for this, but don't look for it only where she told you to, because it might not be, I definitely read this article in the Wall Street Journal. I definitely read it in the Wall Street Journal, and it was in the National Law Journal, and it was 6 months ago. Right. And so the first thing I would say is take notes, but what is it? Trust but verify.
There you go.
That's it. Trust but verify. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, we would get those a lot. I'm sure it was in the Times. I'm sure it was in the Journal. And, I think the author was this name. Well, it was a different year than you thought it was. And it's nice, it's nice that you remembered enough that we could find it. But yeah, trust but verify. I like that.
It's blue. The cover of the book is blue.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Whew.
Yep. Gotta love that. Gotta love that one. So there's been a lot of talk about young associates or young graduates coming to be associates who don't know very much about legal research. Can you talk about that and how you handled that situation if you guys run into it?
That's unfortunate. And I go to the AALL conferences, and every year now, obviously the 2 years that we missed, but for the last 5 or 6 years, there's always been in the opportunity to talk to other private law librarians about that question. What do you do about people coming in who don't have a research background? And here's another thing that, I get in trouble for saying. I blame it on their mothers because they were never made to take a civics course in high school. So that even if you haven't taken legal research at your law school, and many, many law schools have dropped legal research classes, the only legal research you get is at the beginning, the first semester, legal research and writing.
Right.
That's it. And then if you're on law review, you get good, solid research skills.
Right.
But many of them have dropped the whole concept of research as a self-contained, a discrete subject. So, and they don't have the civics background from high school that, old people like I have, so that I know the difference between a law and a regulation.
Right.
People come in and they want the legislative history for this New York Code of Rules and Regulations. Well, let me tell you.
Right. It's a little harder than that.
Right. There's a lot of, and unfortunately, I don't think that in the law firm, that's something that we can do on a group basis. When I meet with the summer associates, I will say these things in a somewhat less harsh manner and to encourage them to, come and talk to me. And I always say, I won't tell. You can ask me any crazy question you want. I'm not going to tell your supervising attorney what you wanted to know about. But we're going to make sure that you're going to look good when you make your presentation to your attorney. So I think there's a lot of one-on-one necessary, and it's short bits because we don't have time. Attorneys don't come to training. We don't have time for that.
Right.
So I'm fortunate, from my point of view, to get my summer associates for an hour on their very first day, and then an hour again a couple of weeks later, and then an hour again at the end of their tenure so that we can talk about what they needed and they didn't get from the library or what they appreciated, that sort of material. So many years ago, Steve Lasters published an article about how much research first and second and third year associates do and how they themselves say they weren't prepared for it. So at that point, I developed what I called the Summer Associate Research Academy, and it was 3 or 4 sessions that some of them were live, some of them were on a video conference because this was the days before Zoom, that hit some of those highlights so that not that I was going to be able to teach them everything they needed to know in that short period of time, but so that they would know, I have this information for you. And so when you get to a point where you don't know what's going on, come to the library because I can help you fix whatever roadblock you've come up against. So, and we did that for a couple of years. And then, of course, we ran into COVID. And so now we're trying to get back up to speed with these 3 sessions that I will have. And I send particularly with summers, I send regular emails with highlighting a resource. If you're working with the tax attorney, remember we have these tax resources. And if you're working with the real estate people, you're going to want to read the New York Real Estate Journal. So I keep the library in front of them. With respect to attorneys already, it's the same thing. It's one-on-one. It's when they contact me for something that's happened legislative history, right? You're in New York,
Right.
I always say somebody is going to ask you for a legislative history, and the bad news is there's no such thing.
Right.
However, we've got this, and I pull out the Gibson quote that specifically says there's no such thing as legislative history in New York. And then I go on to say, however, we do have this stuff called Governor Bill Jackets, and that's probably what your assigning attorney wants. And we have a service that has them back to 1994, and now the New York State Library has a random collection of some of the earlier ones, but I can always go to, the firm is in a position where we have great access to the libraries at the law schools at UB and at Syracuse, and even at Albany, if I happen to be in Albany, but we have the New York State Library as well.
Yep,
So
that's excellent.
we've got good resources. And I tell you what, now that we have offices in Connecticut and Massachusetts, I've had occasion to contact the state libraries, the state law libraries there, and lots of terrific cooperation. We librarians are a wonderfully cooperative bunch.
It's true. I was just going to say that. We had, it's a very congenial group. It's a very helpful group. We had to do that when I was at NILA, reach out to librarians elsewhere. I have no clue what they do in Iowa. And they would say, here, look here, or I'll send you these pages, those kind of things. So I have to ask, because you mentioned the NYCRR, New York Code of Rules and Regulations, were you instrumental? Were you the idea behind that no-cost platform out of Buffalo?
No, I was not, but boy, do I love it.
Me too.
That's Beth Adelman, the director of the library at the UB Law School, and the folks at the Appellate Division Library, Andrew Clark, Betsy Vipperman. Shout out to all of them there, because it's a marvelous, marvelous resource. And I was just in it earlier this week, so that's why it came to my mind. An attorney wanted the New York State Sanitary Code from 1965. And so we used the archive to page back. And it was marvelous, because in the old days, you used to have to go to the library and get your hands all dirty. And, when I say the old days, we're talking 10, 12 years ago?
Right.
So now it's all digitized, and that is a terrific, terrific resource. The NYCRR it's, as you say, it's free. It's great.
It is. It's
Beth and Betsy and Andrew couldn't be happier.
Okay. It was not beyond the realms of belief that you might have been the one that started that or caused it to happen. But it is a fabulous service.
It is. It's so good.
What do you wish you had known when you began your career that you would tell a new librarian?
That's a two-part question.
You're right.
What I wish I had known myself,
You're right.
and this is going to sound kind of crazy, I wish I had known how much I was going to love this, because I might have done it sooner.
Yeah.
I really have enjoyed it. There's bumps and glitches along the way. Some of them involve resources, some of them involve people. But for the most part, I've really enjoyed being a law librarian. And so if I had known how much fun it was going to be, I might have started sooner. But, then I would have missed out on 29 years on the radio. In terms of what I would tell somebody new, and I can only hope that when I retire, the firm will have another librarian in place to assist them with some of the.
Well, at least they'll need to at least 2 people, 3, 4 people to replace you.
Wouldn't that be nice? But I've been thinking about what I would say to that new person, and I've actually started. Again, I'll show you, but folks won't see it. I've started the notebook.
Yep.
Because I'm 20 months out from retiring, and it occurs to me I have not. And this is my own fault, because I am on my own. I tend to work on the fly, and I know myself, and I know how I handle things. But that's not going to be the case for someone coming in. So I've started to. So my advice would be, take more notes, write more things down, because what I'm doing in my notebook now is writing down all of the resources that we use, and who's the contact person for that? Who's the contact person for PLI?
Right.
Who's the contact person for Lexis? Who's the contact person for this and that print material? Because I know it, because I've been doing this for a while, and I know where to look for it, but someone else is going to come in and won't know those things. So I would say right away, start making notes. Start making notes for yourself. When you're researching, that's it. When you're researching for the other folks, for the attorneys, for the HR department, for marketing, you're making notes because you're going to send it to them. You're going to say, here are the 8 resources I used, and these came out, it's not a legal memo, but it's a memo that shows them I've done my due diligence and I found some of what you want now. So I've got that down. It's notes for myself that I can pass along to a successor, that I would say start that. So, who knew that I was going to be here 20 years,
right.
So it's a lot to remember. So that's what I would say.
Right.
Make sure you keep notes for yourself.
So really you're codifying and recording your institutional knowledge.
That's there you go. That's exactly right.
So that's terrific.
Tacit knowledge. We learned about that in library school, tacit knowledge.
Yeah. Yep. It's quite true. quite true.
Communities of practice. Oh, see, all those library school things are coming back now.
Right, exactly. Do you want to talk any more about the music and the connection? Do you see a connection? I mean, I do because of the math and music and library.
It's true that there are studies, and that's a scholarly volume that you referenced, but there are studies from the various educational institutions that children who study music have an easier time with math. It's just like, and it's like cooking, really, when you think about it. You've got 1 cup, you got a half a cup, you got a quarter of a cup, you got 6 tablespoons, and it's the same in music. You got a whole note, a half note, a quarter note. And in music, you're decoding FC, C, G, B, D, F. And in the law, you're decoding. So the logic skills, even though we don't call it logic in music, we call it an ear. It's not unlike the logic skills. I was just reading an article I think it was in Atlantic Monthly by Angela Hewitt. She's a piano player. And one of the things that she's 56 now, but one of the things she's done throughout her career is played the Bach Well-Tempered Clavier books straight through from memory.
Wow.
There was a tour of this many years ago.
My goodness.
She says she's not doing that anymore, but she did it several times. So that the muscle memory is the muscle memory in her fingers, and it's the memory in her mind. And when you think about legal precedent, that's really the same thing. And that's partially why when an assigning attorney says to me or to a younger associate, well, I think it's going to be here. Yes, you can, take that, but take it with a grain of salt. It might be there, but it might be someplace tangential. So having that precedential memory, we're all reading about AI now, right? So and my favorite article was from Robert Ambrogi, where he says, the ChatGPT is getting smart because it's letting it read my blog,
Exactly.
So having all of that background knowledge and background memory, I think that's where we see the combination or the melding of music and legal research, any kind of research, really. Nothing that you read. I used to teach a course in internet research, not just for attorneys. And I would always say, just like music, and here's the music thing. Just like music, you're not going to get good at it unless you practice, right? Everybody can play chopsticks, but if you want to play the Moonlight Sonata, you got to practice. What did they say? Those 10,000 hours, right? So in legal research, in any kind of research, you won't get good at it unless you practice. And you can't stop in the middle of the day and practice because you're working. So instead, what I suggest is at the end of your lunch hour, the last 15 minutes, or the last 15 minutes of the day, or the first 15 minutes of the day before things get crazy, sit in front of your computer and look at the resources you have. Go through the PLI catalog and see what might be of interest to you. Take a look at the resources that are available to you through the firm, because then when you get caught, and look at the headlines. Look at the headlines. Even if you don't read the article, just look at the headlines, because then when someone says, there was something about the Navy developing a program that would help us cross-reference different computer languages. You know what? You've got that part right. There is a program that crosses over, but it wasn't the Navy, it was the Air Force. And I can find that article for you. Nothing that you see is lost, is useless. Nothing that you see is useless.
Right.
And you can't index everything, but if it's there, you've got something to draw on. If you don't ever look at the resources, then when it's time to do the work, you say, I don't even know where to begin, which is why I recommend secondary sources to new researchers in the firm. Don't go right into case law. Right. Take a look at those secondary sources. Those treatises are your friend. So that's that.
Fabulous. Thank you. I could listen to you all day. This is great. This is great stuff.
Well, you remember I told you about fundraising. I used to fundraise on the radio and on television. So when I do give a talk at the firm, I always say, look, I can talk very fast and I can talk without taking a breath because I used to be one of those people on public television that says, call now or Elmo is going to be done, So you have to really dive in there to get my attention.
I'm intrigued that you brought up ChatGPT and these other technologies. You said we're all paying attention to AI. Can you tell me how you think that might affect the future of librarians?
Oh, boy. Well, an interesting thing that I heard yesterday and on a podcast with the Three Geeks a couple of weeks ago is the next new job description is going to be prompt engineer, because everything that ChatGPT, GPT, or any of the others are doing has to start with something. It starts with a prompt. So if you want to get, and isn't this the truth with research, if you want to get good results, you have to have good input. And right now it's good keywords, but when we're talking about a generative AI program, you have to have a good prompt. So I think that librarians, we should all be thinking about adding prompt engineer or prompt engineering to our arsenal of materials that we can use. And there are a lot of firms bigger than ours that are already using ChatGPT and some of the other ones for very interesting reasons. Now, yesterday my husband is not a computer guy, but he's very nice. He listens to me rant and rave about these things. And we were talking about AI yesterday, and he said, isn't this going to be a problem for attorneys because they won't know who to sue?
I like that.
He's got a point there.
I'm sure the litigators will figure it out.
They will. There'll be somebody. So that's what I think. And it's also, that's one of the reasons I'm sort of relieved that I'm starting to make my way out of the workforce, because I at this point, I think I'm too old to learn something really new like that. Well, I've been keeping up technologically all along. And I have had to say to, and in this case, I can definitely say younger attorneys, they'll say to me, oh, I used the books in school. I can't learn how to do that. And I say, look at me. I'm old enough to be your grandmother, and I learned how to do it, so you have no excuse.
Exactly.
Now, though, I'm saying, maybe I am too old.
Well, I don't agree that you're too old, because it sounds like you've kept up with everything. On the music, I just wanted to mention I've just started I'm about 3 months into taking piano lessons.
Oh, yay!
And I have to say, the fact that you and your husband do all this music and just, break into song and playing.
Well, we do. At least
lovely.
That's true. We literally do break into song.
I think it's lovely. I just want to make sure I cleared on something. You were working in the music store part-time.
Right.
And how did you find out about the law librarian job when you were at the music store? Because I thought you said it was on a listserv when you started library school.
Okay. At the music store, I learned about the radio job.
Oh, okay.
At the music store, I learned about the radio job, and the listserv at graduate school is where I found out about the part-time law librarian opening.
Okay.
Yeah, at the music store, it was because the woman who was in charge of advertising, she heard about it because they were going to shut down the beautiful music station and move to a non-advertising format.
Right.
So the music store takes me to the radio station, but the listserv takes me to, and I was in graduate school because of working with the high school librarian when I put the OPAC together.
Okay. And you just happened to put the OPAC together. They bought it. Well, they bought it with a grant, but you just happened to learn how to do it and install it and run it.
Well, yes. Yes. But we did have a lot of help. We had some other mother volunteers. My son was a sophomore at this point. We had some other mother volunteers come in and do some shelf reading so that we would have our card catalog up to date.
Right.
And then we were able to ship out the card catalog to the Western New York Library Resources Consortium, WNYLRC. And they did the digitization, they pulled the MARC records and created them. And then I did the original cataloging for things that didn't show up in WNYLRC's MARC records.
Right.
I did the original cataloging for that.
Right.
And I had taken cataloging in library school, and one of my projects was a catalog for the classics library. You'd be using Koha, one of the open source software programs that was popular back in the day.
Right. And so what made you go to library school? I guess that's the piece that I missed.
Okay, I went to library school when I was working with this librarian doing the OPAC at the high school. She said, you're really good at this. You should go to library school. Literally, that's how it. I said, all right, well, I did, and I have to say, I'm glad I went to library school. And this is maybe another thing to tell people who are thinking about librarianship. You should take the responsibility for learning things upon yourself. I went back to school as a grown-up, but we're talking 2002, so that's 20 years ago. I was 49 or 48. And I was not going to school with the idea that, they're going to teach me stuff, the way you do when you go to school when you're 20, 18, 19, 20, 21. You think, okay, I'm going to absorb all this knowledge. It wasn't like that for me. It was, even though I didn't know I wanted to be a law librarian, I knew I wanted to be a librarian. I'm in library school after all. And frankly, I thought I would be a music librarian because I have the music background.
Right.
But I realized that there were a lot of things that I needed to teach myself. So you need to take responsibility for your own education in library school. And then when you're a librarian, wherever you are, law firm, public library, you need to continue to take that responsibility for professional development and continuing professional education. You should not think that, okay, I've arrived, I'm fine now. I'm just going to do my job and that'll be it, because that's not going to work. It's not going to work. But that's how I got to library school. She said, you could be good at this. So I did.
Right.
It took me a long time because I went part-time because I was working at the radio station while I was in library school. So I was just taking 1 or 2 classes at a time. It took me a couple of years, but I taught myself a lot.
Yeah. I did sort of the same thing. I went to business school. Got out of college, worked for a couple of years, went to business school, went to work for Matthew Bender and LexisNexis. And somewhere midstream, I realized they were not going to pay me forever to sell books after they'd sold, Matthew Bender to Reed Elsevier. So I started library school, and I took 1 class a semester. It wasn't semesters. Drexel did quarters. So yeah, it took 5 years. I started out signing up for 2 courses and quickly realized that wasn't going to work. So one at a time, 5 years.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful thing to do, and I'm touched by so many things you said. But in particular, if you'd known how fun being a law librarian was, you would have done it much earlier.
Yeah, it really is. It's terrific. And we have a terrific firm in that everyone is very nice. Some people are knowledgeable in areas that I'm knowledgeable in, and so there's people to talk to. It really turned out to be a great, final act, maybe. Last act.
Right. Well, do you have book recommendations? I do try to remember to ask people either what they're reading or if you have book recommendations, either personal or professional.
You know what? Thinking Fast and Slow. Daniel somebody, I haven't read it recently. I read it during COVID. Thinking Fast and Slow is a wonderful study of how to learn, how to remember, how to make decisions, and the way our brains can be used to work in different ways. Thinking Fast and Slow is very good. And I recommend reading it in print because it was the kind of book that you want to go back a couple of pages and remember. Thinking Fast and Slow. In terms of history, my favorite history book is A Distant Mirror by Barbara Tuchman. It's about the 14th century. She wrote like a novel. It's straight ahead history. It's all dead, lots of primary sources, but she was just able to write like a novel. So A Distant Mirror is a great history read. And then for fun, in the same vein, Timeline by Michael Crichton.
Yep.
And please don't bother with the movie. The movie was terrible, but the book is sensational.
Yep.
And this is a place where obviously reading the book is great, but getting the audio version of the book is great because the reader does all these wonderful voices, all kinds of women's voices, men's voices, different language groups. Great, great book. Timeline by Michael Crichton. And then, just for sheer guilty pleasure, all of the delightful murder mysteries by Martin Walker. They're the Bruno Chief of Police mysteries.
Martin Walker?
Martin Walker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They're just, we call them delightful murder mysteries. They're so fun. We have every single one. I mean, I hardly buy books anymore because I usually get them get them from Amazon, but we just have every single Martin Walker book. They're tons. Well, and the other interesting thing about Mr. Walker, which you'll see when you look at his page in Amazon, he's actually, I don't want to say a spy, but he's a person who's been involved with international politics on both the British and U.S. side. Okay. And he has another terrific book that's like 25 vignettes about why or how America has turned out to be the way it is. America Reborn, that's what it's called. America Reborn, a 20th century narrative in 26 lives by Martin Walker. That's one of his nonfiction things.
Great. I've added that to the list. Thank you for speaking with us. Thank you for everything you've shared.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Oh, it's our pleasure. I'm delighted to have you join us. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Practicing Law Librarian, part of PLI's Ever Current podcast. Be sure to subscribe and listen to our latest episodes wherever you listen to podcasts. And to learn more about the Practicing Law Institute, please visit pli.edu. To learn more about PLI Plus, which provides electronic access to the full collection of PLI Press publications, and schedule a demo with a member of our team, please visit pli.edu/plus. Please note that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast represent those of the individuals being interviewed and not necessarily those of PLI.